well, just in short, life has been incredible, a great start to the year. But yesterday I got some, like today I want to take out the governments, like the New Zealand
I hear
government, because they
you.
declined my dad's visa, which is meant to be flying from South Africa this weekend. So like in 4 days' time, and
Wow.
they're just money. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me,
No.
like, so $400, no
Yes.
problem. Okay. I spoke to, it used to be 200, they've now upped it to 400. So let's just say I'm one of 10 people a week that they're just coining. And the case officer that you get is the person that decides. They don't even give you the opportunity of giving, because they were saying that my dad's going to come into the country and not leave. And we're like, no, he lives in an old age home, which is paid for. He's got family back in South Africa. They didn't even give us that opportunity. They didn't even send a message to say, um, this is, give a supporting document. Okay. No,
Wow.
declined. And so,
Wow.
yeah, could you imagine? And I don't think and I know that this isn't I'm not an isolated case because a client 3 weeks ago, she flew in from Germany. They held her in isolation for 2 days for something that happened on her visa 14 years ago, Ellie, 14 years ago. And then they deported her to Germany. Like they wouldn't let her come into the country.
I know we have to use these things, passports, all this stuff. I know we have to have these things. Like, I don't want to go like live off grid, but I want to get like as close to that without like living on a
Yeah.
mountain by
Yeah,
myself.
I absolutely, because that's how my husband and I were sitting yesterday. I mean, we were so devastated. We were literally sitting on the kitchen floor, and a friend
Mm.
came and she knocked on our window. She's like, "Are you too high?" Because we were just sitting, just staring. My husband was like,
We're actually just down
"Well,
here
yeah,
crying.
that would be nice. Absolutely, that would be awesome. It just feels like the world is going in
Yeah.
order to freaking come out. But
Yes.
what I found out interesting enough, you mentioned passports. I found out from a friend of mine that is being very involved in this whole sovereign way of being, where you don't need the governments. And
Yes.
she said to me, there's a woman that she knows, and I think she might be on social media. I don't remember her name, but this woman travels from country to country without a passport because she knows the law. She knows that they aren't, I don't know how exactly. My head was also like,
Wow.
exactly. But she travels around the world and she does not have a passport. So think of it as well, like we've come to this country, okay? We paid for residency, we
Mm.
paid for permanent residency. Now we four. We then paid for citizenship, we then paid for passports, okay? So just that little, all in
Yes.
all, little round up for a family of four. I mean, I don't even know the maths, but let's just say hypothetically, easy, 20 to $30,000. Easy.
That's insane.
It's crazy, just crazy. So it's like, oh, and that's the part that irks me the most is because this one person who's sitting, who was the case officer for my dad, just decided there and then that, they've got the bona fide blah, 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 blah. But they don't even give you the opportunity.
Mm-mm.
It's just like, boom, no problem. We'll take the $400, reapply. And that's the part that just annoys me. It's just actually not even annoyed. I was just, when you're just depleted, you just like,
Yes. Yes.
I've got
Yes.
no fight in me.
Yes.
Um, my husband, he's the one that rises up, like he's in the war. I'm in the back. I'm like, hey, you go, boyfriend, I've got you. Friend's like, bring it. And I'm like, okay, you go, woohoo. So, but that's how I feel a lot of us are feeling at the moment. There's those that are going to be coming up and those that are just kind of like holding space. That's what it most certainly for me feels like. And I know the Council of Eight had shared with me about 2 years ago that this year, 2024 and 2025 is like a tsunami. It,
Mm.
it creeps in
Yeah.
and then it just creates
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So not to create more fear because I know there's enough of that out in
Yeah.
the world, but sometimes I just sit back and I go, what the hell, man? What's the
Yeah.
point?
Yes.
Do
Yeah.
you feel like that?
I'm not kidding, Michelle. I just have like these. It's just been like a constant roller coaster.
I hear you. I mean, my theme, I always give myself like a little theme or I give myself some words. And every year I say the same thing to myself. Be careful what you're putting out there, Michelle, because it happens, but then it happens in different ways that I don't. But my thing was rock and roll. And I feel like that's what happens is like I've like hit the rocks and then you come out, you're like, woof, and then just tuck and roll, baby.
Ride the
Yeah,
wave.
ride the wave. Just got to ride the wave. And I know, I think a lot of us are kind of going, oh, like when is this going to all flip? When is it going to all change?
Yeah.
So talk about the telepathy tapes. That's part of how it's like these children, these people are giving me such hope. And as an example, so the two boys that I started connecting with, Cody and Aaron, and this is what I love about consciousness. This is what I love about when we're in a space of vibration. So yes, my human emotions was devastated because of the visa being declined, but I was still being guided. I was still being led in the most beautiful way because I phoned Monique, their mom, and she had picked up, like we had spoken earlier on, and then I saw the email. I said, oh, immigration sent me an email. She goes, okay, call me back, let me know. And then I was just numb and like,
Mm,
and then I thought,
mm.
Michelle, you got to carry on with your day. So I called her, and Aaron, the youngest one, the youngest boy, her son, is 12. And he was sitting on her lap and he was kissing her and kissing her and kissing her. And she answered the phone. And then he starts to laugh. And he starts to laugh. And he's looking at me and he's laughing. And he's looking at me and she goes, yep, he wants us to laugh. And I started to laugh. So
Oh,
much so that the tears were pouring from Monique and I. We were just laughing.
oh,
It's like, when they just, because they get it. He knew what I needed in that
yeah.
moment. And that's the preciousness of these incredibly gifted children.
So I'm gonna give you a number.
We'd blindfold and then show her mother a random number generator, a random picture generator.
The kid will say, "I'm reading your mind," and then they do a few little experiments.
We did various tests, and she was right every time.
Their kids can see things that they simply can't.
Her answer is 100% accurate.
What is the second number?
6.
Oh my God.
We think of as woo-woo or this airy-fairy stuff, but it's true.
Autistic individuals have these incredible abilities.
The science behind this is so much bigger than our knee-jerk reactions of truth.
I'm gonna have everyone on the crew just come and write a word down, okay?
Yi. Ha. Ha. Fa. Fa. Fa.
You've just done an amazing job of documenting these autistic, in many cases nonverbal children who display telepathic powers, which I can't believe I'm even saying, but you show that this is, occurring in statistically significant ways.
Okay, what picture am I looking at now? Okay, that's you. Say it.
Son. Okay, what is this?
You see, I'm not even looking at him.
Yeah.
You have a Harvard-trained neuroscientist, Dr. Diane Powell, who are doing the studies, but you also, seem eminently, normal and not, insanely woo-woo.
I needed to believe it was happening. And so I asked Diane, can I do my own test where I bring the cues and pick the house? I didn't want her to be a factor in it, so I wanted to control the test. I don't want Dr. Powell to bring this stuff. I don't want his families to bring this stuff. I just want to be like the layer for the skeptics where it's like, get this on Amazon. I'm not even going to open it until the day up. And she said yes. And I said, I'd like it to be a family we haven't tested yet, that you've never met. I just wanted to clear out any of the possible factors that could influence this. That's kind of how it began. We brought this young girl, Mia, up from Mexico. Most of the family didn't even speak English. Only her Aunt Sophia did. And I rented a house in Glendale, California. And we took all the mirrors down and all the TVs down and put up cameras every which way and started the process of testing her. And with a divider that would go between her and her mother, we'd blindfold Mia and then show her mother a random number generator, a random picture generator. I brought flashcards, colored balls. We did various tests. And she was right every time.
Hay un personaje en la página 26. Pu, I, R, A, Tu, A. ¿Bien?
The tests were remarkable. I mean, just hearing her say without fail what's in her mother's mind, it's just, I don't know, it's so amazing. And then hearing the earnestness of her parents as well, where it's like, these people clearly are not lying. They're not grifting, you know. There's no ulterior motive here.
You can write a word too. You can write a word.
So Akil just sees the back of my hand. Okay, I'm just going to grab one. Actually, that's too easy. Hold on, that goes with what we just looked at. That's
Tell me when it's ready.
Okay, you see this?
Yeah. What do you want? Okay. Actually, what's in my mind? What's the picture about?
C, R, O, C, O, D, I, L, E, crocodile.
That's so awesome, Akil. That's so awesome.
Ready? And 3. Yeah, and 3. Good job. Here we go. You're doing so good. 8 and 5. I think that, with the telepathy tapes, one of the things that I realized in terms of, instead of me just writing up all these cases, and then that being yet another thing that's in the scientific literature, that people need to hear what I hear, because I'm not just collecting data. I'm assessing, the tone of voice, the content of what's said. You really, there's so much information there that's not like, mathematical data. But there's so much information that you're getting from actually listening to these families and listening to the people who see this stuff, for the first time, or listening to their struggles with, how do I make sense of this? Because that's really what I'm the kind of contact I get all the time from these families is, I don't know what to make of this, and they're relieved that their child isn't the only one.
So, I'm a documentary filmmaker by trade, and I've created 5 feature films. But I will tell you, I felt bashful when I started working on something that had to do with telepathy. My dad, I remember saying something along the lines of, like, your hard-earned career and reputation are going to be, scattered to the wind. It felt hard to talk about to people, to clients. I also direct commercials and stuff, and my mother-in-law is, at the time I started making it, was, lives on a sheep farm in rural Minnesota. And just all these people were like, oh, has Kai kind of gone off the deep end here? And that's why, to me, it was like, just the word telepathy, you can't reduce it to fact or fiction. Let's go look at the stories of these people, the science behind this. This is so much bigger than our knee-jerk reactions of truth.
I just spoke to Dr. Diane Powell. Mm-hmm. In fact, we've been in touch for like a year and a half or something. And I've always found her just to be this amazing woman. And she's just an impressive combination of extremely open-minded, but also extremely rigorous.
Yeah.
And so how did you get in touch with her? You heard her on a podcast? Is that right?
It unfolded by me hearing her on a podcast about her research that she'd been doing.
Today, I'm here with Diane Powell, and we will be focusing on her research on some autistic savants with telepathic abilities.
And I thought that was fascinating, and I wanted to get on the phone and learn more, and went out to visit her. And, one of the first things I, asked of her was, can you pull up some emails? And obviously not share names, but like, tell me some of the things that people are saying when they write to you. And that was a very convincing first step for me to witness, is that, this wasn't just something she was talking about or she studied in a few one-offs. Her email box was filled of parents reaching out saying, I'm finding that my child can read my thoughts. It seems impossible. We've tested it at home. I have no framework for this. Can you explain what is happening? And it was a confusion and a wonderment and sometimes a desperation coming from these parents to understand what was going on. and they don't know each other. They are very siloed. And that was the first moment where I thought, okay, there's something very big here.
So how does one go from a traditional academic background to studying autistic children who have high extrasensory perception abilities?
I learned about autism and savants back in 1986 because I met Oliver Sacks then. So Oliver Sacks was a neurologist who wrote, he wrote a lot of different books. One of the books he wrote was Awakenings, about people that had Parkinson's and were given L-Dopa for the first time. And all of a sudden they went from being like frozen statues to suddenly, moving. And there was a movie made about that. And he was somebody that would study these quirky sort of syndromes that told you something about the brain. One of the case reports were about these twins who were institutionalized, who were autistic, who played a game in which they would say prime numbers back and forth to one another, and they'd be consecutive prime numbers. They would be 6 digits long, and there's no algorithm for that. And they just knew these prime numbers, and not only did they know them, they said they just saw them.
So many of these families, they are told by the doctors when their child is born and is diagnosed with, non-speaking, often severe autism, that they won't comprehend the world around them. They'll never be able to communicate. They probably won't process information beyond that of a toddler. And so parents are all hope is taken away. And they go through this journey, often not even trying to reach their child because they've been told by all the quote-unquote experts that their kid isn't in there. And what I found really early on were 2 families, both Mia and another girl, Amelia, who appears in episode 7, that when the parents were homeschooling with COVID and they had to spend tons of time with their child, all of a sudden their child started spelling on iPads, doing things they weren't ever doing in school.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with Mia. And then when she started communicating, at one point, she started having a diary. And in her diary, she said, I can read my parents' minds.
She wrote in her diary that she can read everybody's mind, but you have to believe in her for her to do it.
Well, they thought, that's impossible. So her mom asked a few questions, like what am I thinking of right now? And, Mia spelled purple umbrella or something, or her dad drew a picture, and what I draw a picture of, and she wrote dog. And that was correct. So then they started doing more tests and taking books off the wall, opening to a page on the book, a page of the book, and what am I reading? And she would spell it out. What am I looking at in the book? And she'd spell it out. And that's when they started doing blindfolded popsicle tests with her, where they'd have piles and she'd put popsicle sticks. So they took a bunch of videos of this stuff, sent it to Diane, sent it to me to kind of pre-vet it. And it was absolutely unbelievable. And they were as concerned and confused as any parent would be. To the point, they were deeply Catholic. They live in Monterrey, Mexico. And they were worried, what are our neighbors going to feel? Is this evil? Is this, there's all these funny things that get put on telepathy. Not what I've learned through making this is what the non-speakers would say is this is a spiritual gift from God. That is, I think, what every single one would say. And us, humans in this 3D world trying to map it out for so long have been like, this is the work of something dark. And that couldn't be further from the truth.
Agreed.
And I just want to say something really quick. Dr. Powell wants to do these really scientific airtight tests with Faraday cages and, get this as tight as can be. And we're hoping to do that in the film that has been the intention all along. These tests I was kind of creating. So it was as concrete as I could make it with the limited finances and stuff. But I would say, yes, I think that anyone there would say that we went through every measure. I bought even a brand new iPad to make sure it couldn't be influenced. I downloaded all the random number generators on set. So we have video of that happening. We took down all, like I said, TV, mirrors, anything reflective. We went through pains to make sure that there was a divider when Mia was shown a number and that she was blindfolded. And then we would take the blindfold off, remove the partition. And as far as the numbers, I think we started off small. 3 numbers, and then we did 4 numbers, and then we did 5 numbers, and it would generate 52763 or whatever, and then she would write it 52763, and it's like she would never miss, and we did flashcards, some random word generators. We would put colored balls inside of a can or something, and she'd tell us what color it was. We did popsicle stick tests, which was beyond telepathy because no one's sending information then. It's like there's a bunch of popsicle sticks and her mom would hand her random ones to put in a pile and she could see them
through
her blindfold.
A perfect blindfold.
Yeah.
Which you had your skeptical colleague, Michael, test. And he was like, I cannot see anything through this blindfold.
Yeah. And that was important to me. I mean, Michael is a very dear friend and he's my DP in a lot of my work. But he approached this very skeptically. Yeah. I mean, more so than even, like me. And so I had him test the blindfold, and I mean, Michael's certainly had his mind blown. You can't see this stuff and not have your worldview change forever.
What are your thoughts? I mean, I wouldn't do it as a skeptic. I'm generally a skeptic in my life for most things. But through seeing this, I can't, it's hard for me to not believe this is authentic. I'm looking at everything. I'm watching her. I'm watching the mom. I'm watching everything. And for me, in my perspective, it's real.
Quickly, the null hypothesis becomes more fantastical than this child is displaying extremely high rates of telepathy.
Yeah. And I think that's important for listeners who haven't listened to the show, your listeners, is that, so kind of where I left off with Mia, so often these parents are told their kids can't learn, which is completely not true. The non-speakers are brilliant individuals inside of there who just cannot control their body. It's a behavior issue, not an intelligence one. So, but learning to spell is meaning learning to control your body. It's a gross motor skill to point to letters, whereas talking is a fine motor skill. And that's why pointing to letters with a letterboard is often a way that unleashes their communication skills. However, because you have to create new neural pathways to do that, often this is really important, a lot of non-speakers don't know where their bodies are. They don't feel them. I've talked to so many parents who said their children didn't even know they had bodies or didn't know they had fingers. And they didn't get that until they started communicating, right? So to help them spell, it often requires touch in the beginning. And then you sort of start to lighten the touch or move the touch until there's no touch. And in the podcast, I use the metaphor of when my dad taught me how to ride a bike. I needed his whole body on me, helping me. And then it was like less body, less touch until finally I was riding the bike. And with Mia, we went out to dinner that night before. Every time we were on Zoom, her mom would have to touch her shoulder or her head to communicate. It was just what she needed. Just the slightest touch helped her. And now her mom is telling me she can do it without it. And that's how most of these kids are. Some will always need touch, but most will graduate to a point where they don't need it once they have more body control, they feel more sense of where they are.
Dr. Powell got into this because she actually saw there was initially some data around autistic children displaying, high clairvoyance or telepathy and studies even prior to her.
Yes. Yeah.
And so there is a body of work. I mean, psychical studies have been going on since the 1870s, the Society of Psychical Research. You had, Frederick Myers, you had William James.
Yeah.
This is a long history.
Yeah, and there was a man named Bernie Rinland who first kind of came up with this idea that maybe not telepathy, but ESP gifts should be a savant skill, and he was noticing it in the autistic population, the severely autistic, non-speaking population. And so I think Dr. Diane was like, okay, there's something to build off of here. And just again to talk about Diane, after those tests with Mia, I was, really shaken. And she's like, they don't count, Kai, in terms of science, in terms of the rigorous science that we need to prove this because she was being touched. So it can never be touched. And it was like, okay, that's unfair. But to these poor children and these poor families, I didn't even want Mia's family to hear that. They were so wanting, just to be part of this validating process. But then the next episode, we go to a young man named Akil who lives in New Jersey who can do the telepathy with his mom across the room.
Okay, what is this? You see, I'm not even looking at him.
Yeah.
I'm just going to put it away. And then fix it. No. Fix it. Focus.
Okay.
Fix it. And then
you're a genius.
So Akil is he's one of the children that I had tested before meeting Kai, and I met him actually through his mom contacting me after seeing me being interviewed by Deepak Chopra. And she's Indian, and she's like, saw Deepak Chopra interview me and said, she's talking about somebody just like my son. And so she contacted me, and I went out and tested her son. And then later invited, Deepak Chopra to come see it. And he was so blown away.
How can you tell what these words and numbers are? Because you're not seeing them directly.
Han.
There. There.
Mine knows how to show my mom.
Nah.
Han.
Nah.
Ma.
Anna.
N.
There.
D. My mind knows how to show my mom's mind.
My mind knows how to show my mom's mind. Type that. It's quite amazing.
So Cody, he's the oldest of the two. He has Down syndrome. And how this all happened is, when you actually can't pinpoint the time as to when things kind of started. I honestly can't, because I've sat and I've thought about this. And again, I don't know timelines. I don't know how this actually happened. And I think Kai Dickens had sent them the people within the community, because she said to me, do you want to come to this group? And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And they then got a list of questions, and she said, Mish, do you want to give this a go? And I was like, okay. So just tuned in, and the questions were answered in the way they were answering them. And I did not know up until this date, I do remember, because I was busy making a New York cheesecake on the 24th of December, 2024. And I was listening to the telepathy tapes. And in episode 10, I was like, oh my gosh, and that's great, and that's great. And, I'm like listening, and I'm busy beating or whatever. And the next minute I heard my voice, Ellie. And I went, oh! And then, because they mentioned Cody and Aaron, and then, and I looked at my husband, I went, I think that's me. And then there was another little clip to it, a little part. And I just burst into tears.
Next, we'll turn to Cody and Aaron, who are 14 and 12. Their mom, Monique, sent me their thoughts via their communication partner, Michelle. My first question to them is what they want all of us to do with the information that we've learned thus far.
Just because we're nonverbal does not mean that we're not speaking and connecting with each other. What we would like for the world, for humanity, is to shut their mouths more and to connect more. They want to be in service, and they want to help parents who the system fails continuously.
Nobody has brought this up yet, and I'm so glad that they did, because our system continually robs parents of hope. They're forced to fight at every turn against schools, medical systems, insurance companies, social services, just to secure the basic supports their children deserve. And when their children age out of school, the fight intensifies. Parents are left to navigate a world with even fewer resources, struggling to care for their adult children while also juggling work. These parents need real, sustainable change. Inclusion of spelling programs in schools, accessible therapies, flexible employment options, and comprehensive adult care services that enable their children to thrive. Parents of non-speakers shouldn't have to choose between caring for their children and meeting their own basic needs. Yes, we have to activate to help the non-speakers, and one of the best ways we can do that is helping the parents too.
He says all of us are a link in the chain, and one is not better than the other.
Aaron also added a sentiment I've heard a few times.
We are the light workers. We are a team that have knowing. We are here to bring change for the negative old way of thinking.
And this is the part that is so beautiful. When you come into these groups on Zoom, it's just pure love, pure love. And there's so many age groups that are there. There's so many different, unique, beautiful individuals, from people who are neurodivergent to, and it's kind of like, when you in a group and you go, these are my people, they get me, because whether I'm crying, whether I'm laughing, whether I don't articulate myself properly, because that's the biggest thing that I apparently don't do. It's like, I just... I just felt the love. And I can only imagine how these mothers have felt because there's even teachers in there that have come from, like, they come from a psychology background or a social worker background or whatever. And they've wanted to work with these children, but they've been defied. That they, like, don't you dare, like Dr. Diane Powell, who lost her license. Okay, now she's regained her license, like they want the proof. And so, yeah, so since then, Monique and I have a understanding because she says she doesn't, at the moment, doesn't hear the way they share their telepathy. So we have an open understanding and agreement that if I get a message from them, that I will just share the message with her. Now, this is where I'm in absolute awe of how when there's no filters, and it's just like the interconnectedness of who we are has been 100,000 million% shown to me. So the group itself is a group which is growing so rapidly, which is really beautiful for everyone. I'll tell you now. Autism, Telepathy, Conversations, and the Healing Gifts Community. I think it's once a month. I think it's now becoming twice a month because there's just a huge amount of people that are joining, from therapists to moms and what's beautiful is in the postings, people will share. There's moms that are going, I have a 5-year-old or I have a 4-year-old and I don't know how to connect with them, or I do, and people are giving their input in this group on Facebook. Now, there's Caroline and Carolyn. Caroline is a British mom who has Kyle. Kyle is nonverbal.
Okay.
He's an adult, but he can sing.
Wow. Wow.
How incredible. I know, right? So I had shared this with a friend of mine who's very science-based, and she was like, that's impossible. How does this happen? What hit out at me as a South African, and I don't know if you've watched this or listened to this one yet, where Kai Dickens is talking to her dad and her dad's telling the story about the elephants.
No, I haven't.
Oh, it's magical. He knew of a guy in South Africa that was working with orphaned elephants, and this gentleman passed over, and every year on the date of his death, these elephants walk for 2 days across to his camp and they go and hold space. How do you even explain that?
What I'm thinking about right now is a story about Lawrence Anthony, who lived in South Africa with his wife. And at some point they decided to buy a game refuge. And they did. And then later on, Lawrence found out about a group of 9 elephants that were going to be killed because they were, in some sense, terrorizing a populated area. People would try to, chase them away and they would come back. So these huge elephants are causing problems, and the only solution was to kill them. Lawrence Anthony found out about that and went into the bush to live with these elephants to gain their trust so he could bring them to his game preserve. Apparently he was almost trampled while he's living with them, but over time they trust him. He moves them to the game preserve. At some later point, Lawrence Anthony died.
He died due to a heart attack.
2 days after he died, there was a commotion outside, and a herd of 21 elephants, all of the elephants now on the preserve, walked 2 days to get there. They're making distress noises.
And here's a clip from a news story about this.
Upon the passing of Lawrence, these majestic beasts walked 12 hours from Zululand Bush to their friend's home to pay their respects. They stood vigil for 2 days outside of Lawrence's house before returning to their regular lives in the bush. They had not visited the house for a year and a half. What's even more amazing is that no one told both herds about Lawrence's death. It's like they just knew about it.
It leaves you with the question, how on earth did these elephants 2 days away know that Lawrence Anthony died? His wife said that there are some things that cannot be explained by reason, cannot be seen. Deep roots that connect all living things, humans and animals. It wasn't until that night, 2 days after Lawrence died, that I truly understood. To me, it's an amazing story, but there's even more, because every March 4th, for at least 3 or 4 years afterwards, that whole herd would show up at the compound celebrating the anniversary of his.
Oh, Dad, you're crying, aren't you?
He couldn't finish his sentence because he started to cry. But the beautiful end to the story is that for years after Lawrence Anthony died, the elephants would come back and gather outside of his house on the anniversary of his death. They walked for miles, sometimes days, to do this. And nobody knows how they can remember the date of his death, let alone how they knew he died in the first place.
It's that deep connection, inexplicable, that we don't see it, don't necessarily feel it, but somehow we're connected. So I find it a powerful story.
It's just magical because you can't explain that stuff. Nothing. And that's part of what I'm noticing and what these children are sharing, adults included, are sharing, is that, I can only imagine it's a very lonely place to live when, you're not able to be verbal.
Yeah.
So talk about a place that they go and meet in the ethers, in the field, and they connect and they know things before we even know them. And that's the humble part of what I'm discovering. We're in for a bit of a bumpy ride, but these children are so gifted and they sense so much and see so much. Like, could you imagine being in that world? Because they've come into this form, I believe, so that the messages can be shared in ways that they can be shared.
Yes. Yes.
Because they are so gifted, they are so clever, and they can tune in to anything. Like, they've got no filters. That's what I love. Yesterday or the day before, Cody had sent something to me, and I type it as they're talking. It comes through, and then I send it to Monique, and it was something to do with Monique's mom that was passing over soon. So I reread it, and I was like, oh, this is going to be hard to hear. And interesting enough, her mom had gone into hospital the day before, which I didn't know that. And then another time, he was connecting with me. They connect together, but Cody, I think, being perhaps the oldest one, he will come in, and then Aaron will, and they'll say, they'll either give me they, or Aaron will say yes, but blah 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 blah. And again, I was just typing some information, and they'd shown me that, because Monique's been going from home to home at the moment, and they said, trust mum, trust yourself, and I think it was like Upper East Kent or something like that. These were the directions that they'd given me, and she immediately sent me a message saying, "Oh, Mish, that makes sense." And she goes, "I'm so glad." She says, "Because tomorrow we're going to Upper East Kent." Like, those are the confirmations. So how do you explain that, Ellie? I don't know.
This takes things to a different level in terms of evidence that we can't really deny.
I think we often sit in disbelief of ourselves. We doubt ourselves so much as human beings. And remember, spirit connection is only now. It only is now. How many times have you and I, you think of me and send a message, I'm like, oh my God, I was just thinking about you. It is only in the now. Again, I believe that everybody is connected. We just shut it down.
Yeah.
People that are perhaps cynical are the ones that are seeking the evidence, that because things don't make sense, and that's okay. It's a world that we've come from, that we live in, which is black and white. I am being taught so much that there's nothing in between you and me right now. It's like we're sitting right opposite each other. We're just on a computer screen, but we are right here. We are right connected, and there's nothing. And that's what I'm learning. And that's part of, I think, how we're flourishing as humans.
Yeah.
And, I never understood The Power of One by Eckhart Tolle. Like 15 years ago, it was given to me, and I was like, I had no comprehension.
Yeah. Yes. There are plenty of books that I start, I'm like, we'll come back to this.
So I don't know much, but I'm learning.
Yeah. How
And
exciting.
it is such an exciting time. And that's part of, the filtration, because we have these filters that have been dominant, that have been dominating us. And that's where this morning, as much as I'm saddened by my dad not coming, when we learn to just be present and accepting, I wasn't yesterday, but I gave myself that space of just grieving, crying, being angry at every Dick, Tom, and Harry. I mean, I was in the war. I was just allowing myself to have that moment, okay, for a few hours, until I was so tired that I sat on the kitchen floor. And I sat and I went, okay, you've now been in the war, come back to your light, come back to yourself. Because being in the war most certainly doesn't serve me.
Yeah.
I think that's where we kind of, things are clicking, and it feels uncomfortable because, when things are clicking, it's bringing movement inside of us.
Yeah.
And the more we allow the movement to just let go of, the more we just see clarity. For these beautiful children that are just incensing in what they notice, they're in vibration. That's my understanding of what they're experiencing. They know frequencies, they know vibration, they know exactly what needs to be clicked in, unraveled, shared in that specific moment. And the one beautiful thing that they come back to with the two teenagers and one young man that I've been working, I don't even like to say working with, but privileged, honored to share messages, is that they come back to the essence of light and the essence of grace, and that we are all love. No matter what, we are love.
I love
we'll
you
just
so
keep
much.
talking. Yeah,
Yes.
me too. And I
Yes.
just love seeing you, and I look forward to hugging you in person soon.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sending all the love and light to literally your whole family. Okay.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing all these beautiful connections and conversations.
I love
Okay.
you
Well,
so much.
beautiful,
I'll talk to
beautiful.
you.
Love you too. Send love to your mom.
I
Okay.
will.
All
I
right.
will.
Okay. Bye, Ellie.
Bye,
Thank you for
Michelle.
having me.
Thank you.